Good evening, East Brunswick, and thank you for tuning in to this version of Facebook Live. What I wanted to talk to you about tonight is a discussion I've been having through town halls. I've given this presentation to the Chamber of Commerce a couple of weeks ago, and it really is a discussion on what I entitle Redevelopment 2.0. Most of you have had an opportunity to see where we've been moving with redevelopment, as some of the projects that we've discussed in the past have all started to come to fruition. But there is a greater vision there, and I think it's time now for us to try to put in focus what that vision actually is. So that's going to be about 15-20 minutes of tonight's Facebook Live presentation. Once I'm finished with that, we will switch over and open for discussion, for questions, whether it's on the discussion that I'm and the presentation that I'm going to give tonight, or anything else that's really going on in the township that you'd like to have answered. That's my role, is to make sure that we are all working from the same set of facts. We all have the opportunity to opine on what's going on in town, but it has to be based on everybody having clear and accurate information. So with that, I'm going to get started on the presentation part. And you probably won't see me a lot. Most of it is going to be off of the slides while I do that presentation. But again, thank you for tuning in tonight. I'm hoping that you find this interesting and enlightening. So, I don't know how many of you remember, but several years ago, the Amazon had gone out and was looking for a second headquarters. That was somewhere around 2018. And when they were doing that, they had very specific RFP that they put together, a request for proposals that any town or city who was looking to try to secure a second headquarters had to fill out this RFP. And it was really at that time that I already had started to think about what redevelopment 2.0 would look like, because it was pretty clear based on some of our plans what we would be doing in town in terms of redevelopment. While many folks hadn't really seen anything yet, we knew what we needed to do. It was time at that point to really start thinking where we're going from there. And if you had looked at the RFP that Amazon put out to the public, and you could actually still Google that to this day, the request for proposals had very specific things that they were looking for in anybody who expected to be a successful applicant. So let's go over some of those things, because I think that they were fairly enlightening. So first, one of the things that Amazon wanted was to make sure that they had a town or a city that was within 30 miles of a large metropolitan center that had a population of over 1 million people. They clearly wanted to have a environment to work in and to have a business that was stable and business friendly. Clearly you want to move to a place where you're wanted. They also didn't care if it was an urban or a suburban location, but they wanted to make sure that in either location they had the ability to attract technical talent, that they didn't have to move people from across the country to get to the area where their second headquarters was located. Clearly, they wanted communities that were able to think big and creatively. That is Amazon. They also wanted a town or a city that was within 45 minutes of a major international airport, because clearly a lot of executives and people working in the company would have to fly in and out, and they didn't want it to take an incredibly long time to get to the headquarters. The application also wanted an incredible number of square footage of office space. So there was never the possibility that that could all have been placed in one building. However, the fact that they would have multiple buildings wasn't a problem, but each one of them had to have the ability to be located close to mass transit, whether that was rail or train or a subway or a bus. It had to be close. Every office had to be close, because clearly you want to move people in and out very quickly. In addition, one of their biggest factors that they were looking for was the diversity of the underlying community, because clearly we're living in a global environment today, and It is important that we have an understanding and an acceptance of people that have different faiths, different ethnicities, different cultures. And so the underlying community being diverse was very important to Amazon. They wanted a place that was close to excellent schools of higher learning, public schools. They wanted to be excellent universities that were either very close or within their backyard, because clearly a lot of their talent would come from universities, and their employees, mostly no different than those of us here in East Brunswick, who ultimately have children, and the underlying school system is important when you're looking to attract employees. So that was important. They also wanted a local government structure and its elected officials that were eager and willing to work with Amazon. Again, clearly you wanted to be in a place where you're wanted. They also had a very big desire to make sure that within easy access of wherever they were located, that there was a host of recreational activities, educational activities, high quality of life scores, whether you're talking about walkability, connectability, the ability to be able to provide the services that your employees value the most. And if you recall, New Brunswick was one of those places that put in an application. And while I've spent a lot of time in New Brunswick, many of you know I'm a physician, so I've spent many, many, many years in and out of Robert Wood and St. Peter's, and I could get in and out of New Brunswick without going on major roads. Had to do that for years. There's a lot of great things about New Brunswick, and it's gotten better over time, and all of that I give a lot of credit to the county and to the mayor and to the people in New Brunswick who had a clear vision of turning it around from what it was 35 years ago when I started residency here. And they've done a great job. However, everything that Amazon needed on that list that their RFP provided could not possibly have been provided by New Brunswick alone. However, it was pretty easy to recognize that had you just taken the camera and lens and made it a little bit wider and looked at the area more as a region as opposed to just one town, you would have seen that by including East Brunswick, which is just a little bit over the river from New Brunswick, that we had the ability to provide a lot of the things that New Brunswick alone could not have provided. And so that's what started getting me thinking about what it is that we need to do in order to be in a position to attract companies, maybe not the size of Amazon, but I can guarantee you that there are thousands and thousands of other companies that are much smaller that I'd be very happy to have call our own and have a location here in East Brunswick. So in order to understand what exactly Redevelopment 2.0 is, I think it's very clear that we wrap our hands around and have a very clear understanding of the three characteristics of what Redevelopment 1.0 is, because it's going on right now. So clearly, the first objective of our entry into redevelopment was to remove blight. There's significant spots on Route 18 that have been blighted for years. I did a video a couple of years ago highlighting the fact that I was looking and standing in the lot that the old Gap and Wiz used to sit in. That was done a shot about 2 years ago in June, just about this time actually. And the first thing I said was, you have to realize that the kids that will be graduating in the next week or two from East Brunswick High School, they've never known any retail in that center. It was blighted. There was weeds growing through cracks. The stores were empty. They were mold infested. Our police know that if there's crime, they were going to be most likely found in those areas. The buildings were falling apart. They weren't maintained. They couldn't be doing anything to increase property values for the people that live around it. So it clearly needed to be removed and figure out what the next phase was. The second thing that Redevelopment 1.0 did was it helped us to fulfill a state and court mandated affordable housing settlement that provides not only housing for people that meet the qualifications for affordable housing, but also satisfies the full market space for which there's still a large demand for housing. And we had an obligation to do that, court ordered. So whether you like apartments, don't like apartments, the fact is that we had to do it, or we would have not been consistent with our settlement, and we'd have been sued and most likely been told to build more. And the final thing that Redevelopment 1.0 did was it allowed us to start to think creatively about what a 21st century Route 18 corridor looks like. Because as most of you know, retail has gone the way of Amazon and companies like that, where people don't need to shop in brick and mortar stores any longer. They were disappearing in front of our eyes over a very long period of time. And at some point, somebody just has to put a fork in it and turn it into something that works in a 21st century environment, which is why we're looking to convert from the old retail model to a more live, work, play type of model, where we feature recreation and services, and a little less of the retail if there's no retail that really wants space any longer. So that's really what 1.0 is about, and you could see that a lot of that is already starting. So then that brings us to where do we go from there? What is 2.0? What is all of this leading to? So in order to start clearly understanding what it leads to, let's understand that there's a lot of things that we've been doing in the township that may not seem to be related to one another. And I want to talk about some of those right now, because at some point when you inject the connective tissue between all those individual parts, you'll see that they really do go together. They have a purpose. And when you connect them, that defines what 2.0 is. So what's in that universe that we're talking about? Well, first of all, it should be obvious now, after listening and reading the list of things that Amazon was looking for, that a lot of the features that Amazon was looking for, we already have here. Most of them, to be honest with you. And again, like I said before, we may not be able to attract an Amazon. That happens once in a lifetime. There's very few companies that are that big. But there's so many others that aren't, who could easily find East Brunswick an attractive place to put their business. We also are extraordinarily lucky, because if you look demographically at East Brunswick and look at the professional workforce right here in town, it's primarily composed of people in the IT sector, the financial sector, healthcare, education, and the biotech/pharmaceutical sector. We're teaming with people that already have that talent. And do not underestimate how important it is to companies to make sure that they have their workforce relatively easy to find. It saves them an incredible amount of money, moving people across the country, moving costs, and all of that makes it so much more attractive for people to look here. If you look at the services, in particular recreational and outside services that we provide here in the township, we're very, very fortunate. For a town our size, we have many different parks dotted all throughout the township, each with different features. The Route 18 corridor, as I said earlier with Redevelopment 1.0, is becoming more and more of a recreational corridor. The ice rink is something that we expect to have construction start by the end of the year. That's going to be something that could attract tournaments and people from throughout the state, besides providing a great venue for those of us that are here in town. Bowling alley, we've got swimming. The Mid-State Mall just recently rented out the old bowling alley to a company that's going to go in and make it an indoor swimming venue for teaching children how to swim. We have Rock and Air. We have 2 major tennis centers on either side of Route 18. So it's clear that over the course of time, Route 18 is becoming more and more of a recreation corridor. You don't have to just go to our parks. Our arts is a very vibrant part of the community. Between the plans for expanding our community arts center, the East Brunswick Arts Coalition, which is raising money for the arts, we've always attracted people in the arts. Our schools have been known for decades for its great arts programs. So that's something that we're looking to continue to promote. But it also becomes an attraction for people who are looking to move here. One of the biggest features of East Brunswick has been our medical corridor. We dubbed the Cranberry Road the medical mile years ago. There's tons and tons of doctors and hospitals and paraprofessionals in the healthcare field that have offices on Cranberry Road. Not the least of which is we also have at least 3 urgent care centers on Route 18. Robert Wood Johnson is going to be renting out over the next year. They're developing it now. The remainder of the old Kmart building is going to be rented out by Robert Wood Johnson. And we have 3 hospital systems on either side of Route 18. In New Brunswick, we have Robert Wood Johnson Barnabas Healthcare System, and you have St. Peter's. And then on the opposite end by Old Bridge, we have the Old Bridge Regional Medical Center, which is now part of the Hackensack Meridian Healthcare System. So we're extraordinarily lucky by having at our fingertips the highest quality medical care right here in town. Keep in mind, Route 18 is the connective tissue that brings New Brunswick and connects us basically to the shore. So that's a huge attraction. We also have a large amount of housing stock here in East Brunswick, whether you're talking about apartments or townhomes or homes of all different price points. Now that goes through cycles. Right now there's a limited amount of stock almost anywhere in New Jersey, but that's a part of a real estate cycles that we all have to get used to. But the fact is we have so many different options and price points for people to find here if you're looking for a house and a home here in East Brunswick. Recently met with the Middlesex County. They were looking to talk to us about the parking decks that we have, because they realized that over the next couple of years they're going to be developing, I'm sure you might have read this in the mail, and in the news, that they were going to be developing the hub, which has now been called the Helix, which is an area in the middle of New Brunswick, which is going to be a tech center. And that's going to house part of the Robert Wood Johnson Medical School. It's going to have biotech space and innovative type of workspaces for people in the healthcare biotech industries. That's fascinating. That's great. But Middlesex County now recognized that one of the biggest problems with doing that is by trying to attract talent to come to this Helix, as they're going to call it. There's really not a lot of place for people to park in New Brunswick. That's always been a problem in New Brunswick. And so they spoke to us about perhaps renting out space in our parking decks and shuttling people into New Brunswick. And the idea of a shuttle system was a great idea because, as most of you know, Ed Russo is looking to build the Vermella product, which is the apartment and community on Route 18. And he's also been the one who's going to be developing a product very similar in New Brunswick where the old Sears used to sit. And he's already announced that he's going to be trying to develop a shuttle that takes people in his units, whether it's in East Brunswick or New Brunswick, to both or either the bus stations here in East Brunswick or the train station in New Brunswick. And so this was an opportunity in meeting with the county to maybe think on a grander scale, that if the developer is going to look at doing that for his own 2 projects, that maybe that's something that we could work together between the town and the county and New Brunswick and the developer to develop basically a shuttle system that takes people to either of the major hubs, the train or bus stations here, and reduce the amount of traffic on the roads at the times when they tend to be the most crowded. So that was a great conversation starter with the county, and they're very interested in pursuing something that leads to a shuttle system. We also have, believe it or not, space on Route 18. Now, many of you, I just referred to the project that's going to be going up on Route 18. This is the Vermella product that's going to be located in the area where the Gap and the Wiz sits right now. Very high-end type of community with a combination of apartments that are fairly well-appointed and retail mixed together so that it's a true mixed-use community. And I'm looking at that thinking, well, wow, if I was in my $3,000 a month apartment and I had a bird's eye view from the balcony at Route 18, what would I see? Well, if you look across the street, you're going to see the empty PNC building. You're going to see a strip mall that was once pretty busy, but now it's probably only about 35% filled. You're going to see Motel 6. You're going to see a burnt out gas station. You may, if you got good vision, see the old Jack LaLanne. That's been empty now for almost a decade. That's what you're going to see. So I kind of think, wow, we really need to look at what we're doing across that highway, because that can't be the view that you have if you're going to spend this much money and this much effort on one side of the highway. We really need to work on redeveloping the other side of the highway. So that's something that we're on the process of doing right now. Most of those areas have been designated as redevelopment areas. They're going through a process to get approved by the planning board and the redevelopment agency and the township council. And we're looking to ultimately figure out what goes on that other side of the highway, because it can't stay the way it looks right now. Out there in the universe, many of you have probably heard about different sister cities that I've tried to put together. We have one already in China, which hasn't really done too much considering what's going on nationally with China right now, but it was a good head start. That was done several years ago, I think back in 2017. Last year we did a sister city with Yavne, Israel, and we're looking at other ones in coming forward in India. And wow, Brad, why are you doing that? Most of the time people were talking about things that we could do with kids, with exchange students and those type of things that promote cultural activities between two different groups of people from two different countries. A lot of our departments have things that we could overlap, but the real reason for doing that was much bigger than that. And the reason is because many of those countries have industries that are looking desperately to find places in the U.S. for a U.S. base of operations. The reason is because, despite what people may say about the United States and maybe that we might have lost our edge, which I don't believe, the largest economic force in the world is still the U.S. middle class. And many, many companies from across the country may get startup money, seed money in other countries, but ultimately, if they really want to grow their companies, they need a base in the United States. We want to be the place that people consider for a U.S. base of operations. And many of the industries go beyond just what you see. Education, IT, autonomous vehicles, transportation is becoming big. Food technology, something that we sit in the backyard of Rutgers University, which has schooling in agriculture, sustainability, biotech. Many companies are looking for lab space. It's very difficult to find, and it's hard to retrofit old buildings that don't have the venting systems that lab space needs. AI, healthcare, biotech. So these are all areas that many companies are looking for space. And we have the talent here, we have the space here. And interestingly enough, if foreign companies all of a sudden start showing an incredible interest in spots in the U.S., it's pretty funny that all of a sudden U.S. competitors often look to see what it is that the other foreign companies found in a particular area, and all of a sudden they start perking up and showing interest in moving. So this is really what we're after. If you were to sit at the top of the towers, which is in the left portion of the picture that you have here, and you look out like I did a couple of weeks ago, I had an opportunity to be at the opening for Wipro. Wipro is a large Indian tech company, one of the largest actually in India, and one of the largest in the world for that matter. And they recently expanded their space. They always had a small space in the tower, but they're growing exponentially, and they ended up putting out taking over an entire floor in Tower 2. And at the opening, you had an opportunity to really look at what you could see from that vantage point at the highest level of the building in Tower 2. This is kind of the picture that you see. You could see virtually the turnpike. You could pretty much see Manhattan and the airport. You could see south on the turnpike for many exits from there. You could see the Raritan River. You could see our bordering towns. And the reality is that when you look at this picture, you're looking at a region. You're not looking at any one particular town concentrates on New Brunswick and East Brunswick, but it's a region. And I think that's what other companies have already started to find before we've even tried to earn them a spot here in East Brunswick. United Healthcare, for that matter, is opening up a regional headquarters in the Towers. They've done that before we've even started to market. There's other tech companies and businesses that are already looking for spots here in East Brunswick, and we haven't even started advertising. If you look across the country, there's many places that have done that well before us. There's places in Seattle and Austin, they're dotted across the country, that made efforts at trying to attract businesses to those communities. But they had to have all the infrastructure there first, and they had to have all of the things that were on that RFP in place for any of these large companies to consider making such a big move. But I was recently in Denver, well, actually, that's not true. The last time I was in Denver, it was beautiful. I had patients who came back from Denver a couple weeks ago and told me that, well, Denver's nice, the scenery's nice, but if you walk around Denver right now, the biggest problem they're having, homelessness. That the city grew so quickly, brought in so many businesses, that the cost of apartments, the cost of housing went up so great, so quickly, that it forced more and more people into homelessness. And so if you walk out of some of these very expensive buildings that are there, whether it's commercial or residential, that's a problem. The government in Denver went from spending close to $70 million a year to almost $190 million a year in the last couple of years just to handle that problem. And it's actually getting some of the companies a little nervous that that's becoming an issue, that crime is going up, and that they may actually consider pulling out of Denver and moving somewhere else because their employees are complaining about that problem. So that's an issue of growing too quickly without consideration of the unintended side effects that can occur from growth that was not well planned. And that's not something that just happens in the United States. If you look across the world, there's cities that have attracted companies. These are the ones for which we'd like to have sister cities, but there's many others in Europe and in South America, same type of issues. But the difference between all of those cities, whether they're the US ones or the ones that are across the country, and Silicon Valley, which is also an area that's brought in lots of businesses over the years, is that Silicon Valley is not one town. It's not one city. It's a region. And that makes it a lot more sustainable because it's not dependent on one place, one city, one township, one government. Things change, but the region is what has attracted people. And so what I'm proposing, what I believe Redevelopment 2.0 can be, is that if we play our cards right, plan for the future, make sure we have the housing that people are going to want when we move them here, that they have all the services that they need, that the things that we already have and the things that we're planning for allows us to be in a position that we could easily be and have the Raritan Valley be the Silicon Valley of the East Coast. We have all of the ingredients that we need, we have right here. We just can't do it alone. We need to do it with partnerships within the region and with a county and state that supports that type of growth, and with residents that clearly understand the value of what we can have if we're able to bring this type of energy and excitement to this region. It could change us really for the next generation. And so I kind of think the ship's already left the dock a little bit because we're already well on our way. We just need to understand where we're going and make sure that our neighbors are on board, because to be honest, the option at this point for most of them is, either be led, follow, or get out of the way, because we're on our way. And I think we're in a good position to really make good on those promises. So that's Redevelopment 2.0. That's really what's in the next phase of what you're starting to see happen right now would lead to, and I think it's really exciting. If you have questions later and want to write to me or call the office, you're certainly more than welcome to do that. It's mayor@eastbrunswick.org or bcohen@eastbrunswick.org, or you're welcome to call the office at 732-390-6810. Thanks for watching.